Good afternoon in New York, morning on the West Coast, good evening and night in Europe, Africa, and Israel, and welcome whatever time of day or night it is for those joining us from the rest of the world. And we have at least people from at least 20 countries with us here this afternoon. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for the Study, Prevention, and Treatment of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. This International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma webinar follows 27 January, the International Day of the Holocaust. Participants will describe the process of choosing to and making the documentary Whispers of Silence, Listening to the Children of Holocaust Survivors in Mexico. So participants will reflect as well on its impact on audiences at home and abroad and discuss future plans. As some of you have already seen, produced in 2021, based on 90 interviews with Mexican offspring of Holocaust survivors and 15 related experts. The documentary, which is in Spanish with English subtitles, follows the survivors' traumatic Holocaust experiences, their trying journeys to Mexico, where they create a haven for themselves and their newly created families, raising their children in the best way they knew how, while transmitting to them their Holocaust and post-Holocaust legacies of trauma and resilience. The film teaches us this living post-traumatic historical complexity with exquisite eloquence, psychosocial sensitivity, commitment to and love of life. Your moderator, that is me. I'm a clinical psychologist, victimologist, and traumatologist who has devoted much of my career to studying, treating, and preventing multi-generational impacts of massive trauma, as well to victims' rights and to reparative justice. Our first presenters are Aaron and Esther Cohen, have worked together for over 30 years, producing audiovisual and documentary material on the Holocaust. Having conducted interviews with Holocaust survivors and their offspring in Mexico, they produced Heaven in Auschwitz, which is heaven, you have to watch it, and Whispers of Silence, Listening to the Children of Holocaust Survivors in Mexico. They are now finalizing a web platform of 130 interviews with survivors' offspring and 15 interviews with specialists on the second generations. Aaron and Esther are followed by Alexandra Salomon, a graduate of educational administration at Anahuac University in Mexico. Alexandra is married with 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Born in 1921 in Berlin, Germany, her father, Claude Salomon Davidson, fled Berlin with his parents in 1933 for Antwerp, Belgium. At the beginning of 1941, they fled to Paris, soon invaded by the Nazis. and arrived in Mexico December 8, 1941. Her father's grandmother was murdered in Treblinka extermination camps. Last but not least, we are honored to have with us Salomon Chertorivsky Waldenberg, Mexican politician and economist, public servant for over 20 years, having served as National Commitment for Social Protection in Health, Secretary of Health of Mexico, and Secretary of Economic Development of Mexico City, Federal Deputy of Movimiento Ciudadano, and you correct me, a political party, where he is the chairman of the Mobility Commission and Secretary of Health Commission. Salomon is also president of Pensanado en Mexico, the National Consultative Council of the same political party. We have about an hour and a half for the webinar, though we have been known to run over time. Each speaker will talk for about 10 minutes. Following an interchange among us, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience. Panelists will then conclude with last words. Please use the chat function and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can. Please feel free to direct your question to a particular panelist or to the full panel. I give the screen to Aaron and Esther at whatever order you choose.
Okay, thank you very much, Yael. We are very, very happy to be here in this webinar. And of course, we are happy that our documentary is being seen by many people all over the world. So Esther is going to start with the introduction of this presentation.
Okay, thank you. Silence is not oblivion. Trauma, memory, family ties, and transmission. How did the horror lived by the Holocaust survivors affect their children's way of perceiving the world? After 4 years of intense work, with great emotion, we present our documentary Whispers of Silence, dedicated to the memory of our dear sister Jenny and brother Salomon, who both died in 2020, the year of the pandemic, after an intense fight against cancer. This work is the product of an arduous investigation of the transmission of intergenerational violence and represents a semblance of the second generation compiled through more than 90 testimonies of children of survivors. These survivors arrived to Mexico during or after the war. And how wars, collective killings, genocides, and any type of violence continues to have a life on its own many years after it has occurred. In these children of the post-war period and the Holocaust, the echoes of the greatest crime against humanity and the hope of a new life in peace, tolerance, and harmony continue to beat.
For us, this work symbolizes the revelation of an unknown world that has left us a great learning and has meant a very important personal growth. It begins with an historical account of what liberation meant for survivors of the Holocaust, the realization of the utter dispossession of their humanity, the loss of their country, their home, their family, and the harsh exile they had to live, and what it meant to reinvent themselves and start a new life in an unknown and complete different country, Mexico, with their difficult process of adaptation to a new culture, a new language, and a new climate. Each testimony represents a unique and singular experience. Behind each story, there is a proof of unconditional, deep, and infinite love. Silence is not oblivion. For parents, it is protection and respect at the same time. It is present as a weapon against suffering and becomes the possibility of building a new life where the horrors of the past are buried and allow them to be reborn and move on. For children, it is shelter, protection, the need to care for their loved ones in order to avoid pain and suffering, experienced and perceived in each gesture without words. However, this silence permeated them to such a degree that it represents an unsurmountable barrier against the truth, horror, and the shame of what the parents experienced and was transmitted to the children without words. The pain was so great that they did not want to cause more pain in their families and the children out of respect, did not want to cause more pain in their families, and the children, out of respect, did not dare to ask. They sensed that it was something untouchable.
In Whispers of Silence, we don't have a narrator. The documentary is told by the children of the survivors interviewed and explained by 10 leading researchers and experts on the subject: psychologists, psychoanalysts, historians, sociologists, philosophers, etc. We want to thank the children of survivors who allowed us to interview them and open the doors of their home, their soul, and their heart to tell us their intimate and personal stories. Many of them are friends from many years ago who spoke for the first time, who agreed to reveal their deepest feelings on the subject, and who moved us to tears.
We hope that this effort has been worthwhile. We expect that this work that we have carried out with our hearts transcend borders, make it enlightening, and carries a message of peace, tolerance, conscience, and harmony for the world and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, our minister. Alex, would you please follow? And as for those of you who have seen the film, of course, you recognize Alex from the film. Go ahead.
Well, it's a great honor to be today with all of you. The first memory I have of these whispers of silence was I was 8 years old, and at that time we were living in the States, in Cincinnati. And I remember that on this black and white TV in those days, it was all of a sudden they started showing something about a concentration camp on the TV. And my dad just got up, jumped, and turned off the TV. And one kind of like remembers some little details of when you're 7, 8, 9 years old. And I just looked at him, and he walked out of the room, and I asked my mom, why did Daddy turn the TV off? And she said, oh, because he doesn't like that. And that was it. But afterwards, I mean, I could remember the images. It was like people arriving at the concentration camp or something. I don't remember very, very well, but it had something to do with it. And with the years, I just think about that moment. And I never dared ask him it was something that just remained in my soul for the rest of my life. I mean, that was almost 60 years ago, and I still remember it.
Mhm. If you had a chance to ask him now, what would you ask?
I think I would just hug him. Yes, I don't know. He very, very, very rarely talked about those days when they were. He almost never. What I know is through my grandmother, my dad's mom. Sometimes she would tell me, "Come over to my house, and I'll tell you some things about the war." And we were fleeing, and we were going down France and staying in little towns, and she would tell me all about it. I was a teenager, and I remember I would like, oh, and that happened, but I would never ask my dad because I knew he didn't want to talk about it. And
Go on.
well, it's just something. So I just, every day of my life, I just think, how could that happen? It's just something that I have myself, and I just think, I mean, how can they have done that to little babies, little children, and mothers, and well, to everyone? I mean, it's just like, I can't believe, I mean, that happened. It's just, it's really, really painful. And then about what happened to my great-grandmother, my father's grandmother, I found out about it like it was maybe 2 years before. It was like maybe 10 years ago. My dad passed away 7 years ago, and this was like 10 years ago. We went to an Anne Frank exposition, and he told me, "Alex, I have to tell you something. I never knew, no one." I would ask my grandmother, and she said, "No, we don't know anything. What happened to my great-grandmother?" And that's when he told me, "You know, your great-grandmother was sent to this well, it wasn't a concentration camp, because Terezin was like a ghetto where they were transferred, and then from there they were sent to concentration camps." And so I said, but she died there, and he said, "Well," and then he stopped talking about it. So these past, I mean, during many years, I've been getting into Yad Vashem, and that's where there are some inconsistencies, because, but I mean, she was born.
Just for the audience who doesn't know, Yad Vashem is the museum in Israel. It's called the Museum of the Shoah, which means Holocaust, and Vorah, which means heroism. And it was the first one. Later it was followed, for example, by the Washington National Museum in Washington for the Holocaust, in trying to collect all the names of those who perished as one of their activities. So this is what Alejandra is talking about. Go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to make sure the audience knows when you said, so you said you spent a lot of time in Yad Vashem researching. What did you find? Mm-hmm.
So that's when I found, I mean, the birth date is not the same as my great-grandmother's, but everything else is the same. The last names, where she lived, everything where she was sent to from Teresín, which was in August 1942, and then like 4 or 5 weeks after, she was sent to Treblinka. And it's really painful just to think what my grandfather, I mean, his mother went through. And my grandmother would always tell me, you know, your granddad is sad because he could never say goodbye to his mother. And well, those are just the little things she told me. Yeah.
It feels like you have the burden of the whole film in one of the participants. Have you seen the film?
Oh, yes.
Yes. What do you feel about the film? What do you feel? Has the film done for you what you were hoping it would?
Well, I think it's just unbelievable to have interviewed so many people, and you just get the feeling that they all had the same feeling or similar feeling as I did, like just the whispers of silence, and they were never really open, you know, their parents would never really talk about it openly. But I absolutely understand it, because it's very, very difficult. And sometimes I think I don't talk about it a lot with my 3 grown-up children. They're all married and with children, but I think I have the feeling that they do feel that I am transmitting it to them, but through, like Aaron and Esther say, through whispers. It's just that you just inherit. I have the feeling I inherited it from my dad, that I can't really talk about it openly with them. I don't want to hurt them or for them to suffer. And yeah.
So what you're saying is the conspiracy of silence also becomes intergenerational.
I think that absolutely is what happens. I don't know what my little grandchildren will feel about it, if my children will transmit it to them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I have the feeling it's going to be something like that. They're not going to really talk about it.
Salomon would probably comment on the societal aspects of the silence as well. But before he does, since I am also one of the participants in the film, let me correct something or add something to what I said about it. Which is very important, because and has been shown in our studies of the last 15, 20 years, which is the external conspiracy of silence, or the societal and survivors' conspiracy of silence, is brought into the family, then not only into the family, but of course it brought into the individual, him or herself. And as a result, some aspects of the identity of the individual are silent internally, which means in many cases, unapproachable for communication. Internally first, and therefore interpersonally, into the family, and psychosocially with others. And then, of course, societally, and very often, as I'm sure we'll hear from Salomon, politically as well. It has implications on every level. So please remember that. What we found out in our studies, for example, is that not only do the children receive the impacts through their parents, survivor parents, but also in direct relation to the trauma itself. So the knowledge about it, right? So it's okay, because you hear about epigenetics, etc. today. It's not only inside. The societal, political implications are directly related. So I corrected myself, and please put it in a movie, that part. And Salomon, would you like to please speak? And then we also speak among ourselves some more. Go ahead, Salomon, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Danieli. It is a pleasure to be with all of you in this Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, I forgot.
No, it's really great to have the opportunity to be with all of you. Let me tell you the truth. When Aaron and Esther contact me at the beginning, I didn't really know why they were asking me and what they wanted out from me. Because obviously I'm not an expert on multi-generational trauma. I'm not a son of a Holocaust survivor, and I'm not an expert on Holocaust. What I am is a third-generation Mexican born from Jewish immigrants from Ukraine and Poland. Today I'm a Mexican Jewish that have served for many years, over 25 years for Mexican governments. And today I'm a congressman, and I have to say the only Jewish congressman in Mexican Congress. That is why what I am, what I do, and what I have done. And when I start reading about the Dr. Yael Danieli, I saw the documentary, I start understanding what multi-generational trauma is, what it may teach us if we understand it better, if we study it better. Then I probably understood what Aaron and Esther wanted from me. And that is what I do every day. That is, how can we translate what multi-generational trauma studies understand, the tragedies that this world has lived, and the survivors of those tragedies, what they can teach us in order to do better public policy with the new traumas that we have. And I choose only 3 traumas in order probably not to give any answers, but to at least put some questions into the table and make us think about how can we use multi-generational trauma knowledge in order to think how new traumas can be understood better, and how can we deliver good public policy in order for next generations that are going to live with these new traumas. So as we say in Mexico, en tres nueces, with 3 nuts. The first one, and the footprint of pain that we are living in Mexico today because of the violence that we live into everyday life, the lack of peace in many parts of the Mexican territory, organized crime, because I have to say, when my great-grandparents came to Mexico, when I was a child in Mexico, we had a Pacific country. I mean, a country in which you can go out of the streets and you can be in your bicycle and play in the playgrounds and be free. But over the last 3 decades, we sadly are living an incremental spiral of violence and a lack of peace again. And I have to repeat this because when my 2 daughters were born, I did not feel the same peace that I had when I was a child. In order to live in the streets, to be peaceful around the country and around the streets. And probably many people that are listening to us feel the same. They don't feel the same peace that we used to feel. And that is a reality, because if we just look over the last 3 decades from the early 90s to today, we had an increment on the yearly homicides of more than 113%. Today we're living years in which we have more than 30,000 people killed in Mexico. So how can you feel safe and peace when you have, again, 30,000 people killed around the country in Mexico? Not only that, for example, the homicides of women in Mexico has increased over the last 3 decades over 157%. The feminicides, a term that we use in Mexico and it's not used in many other countries, which means the killing of a woman because of being a woman, has increased only from 2015 to 2022. That is, over the last 7 years, more than 129%. Today we have 11 women killed daily because of being a woman. And if I say more, I mean, in this beautiful country, this gorgeous country that has everything, but we have to speak about the violence that we are living, because after understanding a little bit more about multi-generational trauma, I truly believe today that Mexican next generations are going to have a trauma because of the violence that we are living today. A second note, and this one probably we can relate it to many countries of the people that are watching this webinar, and that is the pandemic. You know, again, as Dr. Danieli was saying, I was the Ministry of Health of Mexico, so health is always in the top of my mind. And I'm not gonna get into the pandemics on the health side or what we lived over the last years. And I'm gonna say many countries did a better job than others. Mexico did a terrible, a criminal job combating the pandemic. But my point is that in Mexico, more than 700,000 people died of COVID-19. In 2020 and 2021, more than 1 million people died in Mexico. We have never had 1 million people died in a year in all Mexican history. And if that wouldn't be, we calculate we have between 200,000 and 250,000 children that were left orphans because of the pandemic. So what is going to be the next generation trauma because of the pandemic? And that is more a question to Dr. Danieli, and how can we learn about trauma in order to prepare ourselves to help the next generation live with what we've been living today. And let me end with a third note, and that is because over the next days, it's gonna be the first anniversary of the Russian invasion to Ukraine. We always say never again when we are documenting the Holocaust, and today we are talking about it. Why these things happen again? I mean, I went to Ukraine last summer, and I saw the suffering of the Ukrainian people that 100 years ago, when my great-grandparents went out from Ukraine, they went out looking for a better place. They were escaping from violence, from the pogroms, from the First World War and the Russian Revolution and the pogroms that came over those days. And 100 years later, the Nat went back during the war to Ukraine. People in the same territory were living the same violence. How multi-generational trauma can help us understand in order for not repeating the same mistakes over and over. With that, Dr. Danieli, I will stop my thoughts.
Thank you, Solomon. You are, sorry, this is not to reduce the amazing impact of everyone else here, but you being with us, for me, is an absolute gift, much bigger than Super Bowl, because, and thank you, Aaron and Esther, for that, because a huge part of my own personal, professional commitment to this field is indeed to teach policymakers and to have policymakers ask exactly the kind of questions you're asking. So thank you, Aaron and Esther, not only for your film, but and Alex, but this is for me a dream come true and a first, because originally when I was thinking about our webinars, I wanted the policymaker in each webinar. So God bless you, and if I cry a little, it's a good cry. Thank you. And you also opened the door for me to let the audience and everyone know that on Wednesday, the 22nd of February, at the same time as today, the 1 o'clock, we found that works for sort of a lot of the world except the Far East, for which we need to meet either late in the evening or early in the morning. We will have a webinar exactly of Ukrainians asking the same questions, right? The multi-generational legacies that led to this, to today, and how do we prevent the destructive or pathogenic legacies from going to succeeding generations. So please, all of you, join us then there too. And all of our webinars are a series, so we follow this kind of discussion according to in a historically meaningful fashion, I hope. I'm wondering, the second phase of our webinars, our discussion among us. Aaron and Esther and Alex, any reactions to each other, and Solomon, to you?
Yeah, I want to comment one thing that talked Alexandra a minute ago, that the same comment came from Jaime Tictin, children that appears in the documentary. And he told me he was sitting in the auto cinema, the drive-in, to see the documentary for the first time. And he was with his son sitting behind him. And he realized at that moment that he was part of the conspiracy of silence, because he has never told his children that what happened with him, what happened with how their mother transmit him the trauma of the Holocaust. And he realized in that moment that he was part of the conspiracy of silence too. And in the other hand, what about Solomon is telling us, with our work, we are trying to do that people get conscious about this transmission, and I think we get it, because in many exhibitions we talk with the people, and we present this documentary at the Cineteca Nacional, which is non-Jewish people, and they get impact with the documentary. They feel very
Moved.
They feel very moved with the film. They feel very
empathy.
Empathy. They have a lot of empathy about the documentary. So that's our goal, to tell the people that violence leave
after.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Leave how do you say, huellas.
Huntings, no?
Yeah.
Impact.
Leave impacts in the next generation. So any kind of violence, we are talking about the Holocaust, but it's general for all the society and for all the people and for all the world.
For all the violence, and for all the violence.
Yeah.
Like kidnap, like
any kind of violence, violation,
any kind of violence that everyone lives has an impact in his life and in the life of the second generation and the third generation that they are living. Okay.
Yes, Alex, any thoughts about within the discussion?
Well, No, I just think that everything you say is very, very interesting. Very interesting.
What about what Solomon said? Do you have any questions to him or answers to him?
Well, I just really hope that I always have the same feeling, exactly what Salomon was just saying about I mean, being able to go out to a park in Mexico and just sit on a bench and watch the children. And nowadays it's like scary to do that. You have to be looking around and you don't feel, I mean, I at least don't feel that safe. It's sad because, as he says, it used to be just a wonderful, wonderful place, a wonderful country to live in. You weren't afraid of someone taking away your bag or something, and now you have to be very, very careful. It's really sad.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking, the first time I was in Mexico was 1972. And I don't remember at all being afraid of anything. I mean, I was feeling very free and very happy, and very much fell in love with the place, no question about it. And I visited many times, including in Acapulco, right, with the kindness of all our friends, Steffi, Faschlich, and family, and it was just free to walk around, and it changed. It changed in my experience indeed as well. But Salomon, it's interesting that you mentioned the figure 30 years. 30 years is the life of a generation, you know that. When we think generationally, we think, so when you asked how would I even think about it, number one, I would think about what happened 30 years ago, or within the decade before the 30 years ago. Again, our work, for which Aaron and Esther are exemplary contributors. So the center's work is totally informed by multidisciplinary discussions, right? So we work historians together with anthropologists, together with sociologists, together with psychologists. As in your film, you have in fact included among the experts you include exactly these kind of experts, right? So this must be a multidisciplinary discussion, serious discussion in Mexico that I would love to participate in, Salomon. If no question, I will learn a lot while teaching, so it's the ideal situation. But there has to be a historical understanding where things tore, right? Because it's always, we talk cumulative trauma, but at some point with cumulative trauma, it tears.
I'm completely, you are completely right. And I took the 90s because of that, because it's a generation. I thought of that. And yes, Dr. Danieli, I have my hypothesis on what happened. It has been more or less studied, but it's not always put in the center as the breaking point of why violence started, or why there was a social and cultural change in the Mexican community in order to create the possibility of a new violent Mexico. And you know, I don't want to bore the people that are watching us from all around the world.
No. I don't think you're boring. No. I don't think there's any boring question here. People who are watching us are interested in these issues.
Okay, so I'll throw my hypothesis, and digo, Alex and Aaron and Esther have lived in Mexico, so they can give their thoughts about it. But for me, the breaking point in the 19th was 1994, 1995. Before 1994, we were really, or we thought we were in a path to development. Those were very good years in terms of a new, very young government, very technocratical. We signed the first free trade agreement with North America. So we saw ourselves that we were getting into the first world. I mean, signing a free trade agreement with the US, really moving into development. There were a lot of things going on in the country that seems to be an opportunity. We have a good social policy through a program that was called Solidaridad, which even for many people, it was a good possibility. It seems that things were going, or for many people, it seems that if you have economic problems, things were going to get better, etc., a big etc. But when we were in that imaginary dream of getting into the first world, reality came into place. And first, there was the eruption of a guerrilla in Chiapas, the EZLN, a guerrilla army that the cause was, don't forget about the indigenous people because they are not as good as you think they are. They have been discriminatory problems, inequality problems, poverty problems, and they are here. So it was a call of not everything is going okay in the country, and we are far away from the first world because that developed country that you are thinking is not the same developed country for all Mexicans, and at least for half of the Mexican population that lived in poverty. That is not a reality. That same year, the presidential candidate of the ruling party was killed.
Yes.
That was also a moment of what is happening in Mexico. And after the transmission of powers in 1994, one of the worst economic crises hit the country. So when we were thinking about, we were moving to the first world, then the social reality came into place, and the economic reality came into place. And I think because we had other economic crises before, but this one in particular was so hard into the social living of Mexico because we really thought that we were in our climax, in our ecstasies. So I believe that cutting point, that breaking point in our history changed our trajectory. Many people were disappointed. That disappointment came into place in many different forms, and a very important one was violence. After those days, the tremendous violence that we lived and many people may remember in Mexico City on the second mid of the 90s, the kidnappings and many things start happening in Mexico City that they didn't exist before. And I truly believe it was because of the huge disappointment of a government that made us feel that we were moving to the first world, but reality came into place and we saw that we were not moving into the first world and we were far away from it.
Thank you. And that is a very important political dimension discussion. For us, for example, right, to use the Danieli inventory to study systematically the psychosocial effects, we would attend more to the psychological and social, right? So again, the analysis has to be from multidisciplinary point of view. Let me add two more thoughts. One is we have learned as psychohistorians that untreatable multi-generational wounds or untreated in the past multi-generational wounds remain to fester if we don't speak. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, for example, one of my dreams for the Danieli inventory is for it to be studied with indigenous groups in Mexico, because I know that there are old wounds that I'm sure have never been looked at from that point of view. In that sense, the film would be a model to help other communities who have never been attended to in a total way, and whose traumas continues to fester. You mentioned the issue of women. I remember in the 80s being in Guadalajara in an international meeting on violence against women in Mexico, and both domestic violence and general violence. And I remember being shocked then, and your statistics is totally shocking now. So of course, I'm sure the cultural dimension here is absolutely necessary for the analysis. How come, with all of the poetry and admiration of womanhood in the romantic part of Mexico, of Mexican culture, how come the reality is so horrendous? So there's a gap here that is astonishing. Unlike you, I cannot comment on the criminality about COVID, but just to say that we've heard it all over the world, but not only about Mexico, I'm afraid. Yes, you absolutely, we as a world must attend to the orphans and to all the people who have lost and not been able to mourn, because if somehow life, especially in modern times, is moving so fast, you don't have time to cry, to even sit and cry together. Yeah, that is a huge issue for the world. And as you know, we have brought it up and many others, that there is a mental health crisis caused by COVID across the world. There is a huge rise in suicide among the young. So Mexico is not alone in this, and I'm a great believer in multilateral potential of help. And so this is an extremely important conversation to have. And the open wounds are not only Mexican, they are worldwide.
Yes.
But go ahead, Aaron.
I want to comment. Yes, I want to comment about the increasing of violence against women.
Yes, please.
This is my hypothesis, my personal hypothesis. We live in a machista society, a very, the man is prominent in families. He's the leader, he said what to do. We are in a very machista society. So now the woman starts to work, starts to finish their careers. They start to bring money to their homes. They start to be more independent. So the macho, the man, do not want to accept that. That's why I think that's why the violence against women increased a lot, because they said, no, you cannot do this to me because I am the man. I am the leader of the family. I make the decisions. We live in a very machista society, but women are working, are integrating to many spaces, political spaces, medicals, engineers, everything. They are working, and the macho said no, and that's why the increasing of the violence against women. I think so. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm sure it's one of the cultural answers. But again, we need to study in order to understand, and in order to then we go back to the policymakers, right? Create the correct policy, and not only correct policy, but the enforceability or implementation of the policies. So this is a very wise discussion. Aaron and Esther, did you know that your film will have such an impact on?
It's very important.
Yes.
We are really impressed what the people that saw the film. We showed the film about 4 days ago.
Yes.
And the people were crying. They're crying, and they said, I didn't know that this happened to the families. I know those families. I know these survivors, and I didn't know that happened to the children.
Inside the
Esther
family.
can talk about because
Yes.
she was in that show, in that presentation. Oh.
I'm surprised.
No, the people that they were all Jewish community. It was with the WISO.
With the Women International Science Organization.
And the first screening was only for women. Women were only two men. Alexandra's son and another catedrátic that was there. But they said that everyone knew the survivors and the daughters and the son and the daughters of the survivors, but they didn't think that inside the families were those problems, those feelings of silence and not to talk, to protect the parents, they protect the parents not to suffer with what happened to them, but the children protect the parents too, and they didn't ask for don't hurt the parents, don't hurt the people that suffer. And a woman said, "I'm so sad for them," and I said, "Don't be sad, because the second generation and the third generation are making want to make tikkun olam. They want to
make a better world.
To make a better world.
We call it to repair the world.
To repair,
the
to
world.
repair.
Yes,
that
is a mistake. You still haven't corrected in the future.
Yeah, we have to correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But they want to repair the world. I told her, don't be sad for them, because they learned about that experience and they want to repair. I think the next generations are going to have a trauma here in Mexico, in Ukraine, and in all the world, because the world has a lot of violence today. But I think the hate doesn't, ¿cómo te explico? Que el odio es menos fuerte que el...
Esther says that hate is less strong than that
living
a good life to have a good life.
I don't know. I am so...
I don't know. I don't know either. It's our psychological, ideological, psychoanalytic grandfather, Sigmund Freud, used to speak about eros and thanatos, and the persistent tension between them. Solomon was speaking about the Ukraine and the same issue of never again. How many more never agains are we going to have? So I get very torn about this, whether, but I think love and being with people and sharing our feelings and thoughts critically important. But understanding human nature, it depends on the day whether I feel desperate or hopeful or in the moment. But I actually wanted to mention one more thing about our studies and the Danieli inventory, the impact on the children. We named reparative adaptational impact. Why am I mentioning it? Adaptational because we are born into a situation we adapt to. And we are brought through horrible situations or man-made like Holocaust, or nature-made or man-made like the horrible earthquakes now in Turkey and Syria. We have to adapt to the realities that the world presents us. Why do I include the word reparative? Precisely for what Aaron and Esther just mentioned, and it will be interesting for you, Alex, also, as well as Solomon, of course. The reparative part is because I believe that, I profoundly believe that every child, not just child of survivors of the Holocaust or of other catastrophes, wants to repair the world for their parent and themselves. the first time when a baby sees mother crying, what does the baby do normally? Now, you're unmuted. You're muted. But,
Yeah.
but again, as you know from my theories that are in the film, I don't believe there's only one way to respond. But at any rate, I do believe that every child adapts but wants to repair the parent's pain.
Yes.
And repair the parents' pain, but also their own, right? To repair the world. Tikkun olam is the Jewish philosophy about it. In Judaism, we believe it's an obligation. I believe it's before the obligation level. And we also at the center give what we call our awards. We call the Repair Awards for the same reason. We give the awards for people who repair the world in some ways. So I wanted to add that and certainly Aaron has been the chair of the media section of the library of the center. And thank you for all you have done. So you know that, and certainly it will be acknowledged in some kind of a repair acknowledgement as well. I wanted to add that to your thinking. But one more thing. I used to have at the entrance to my office a quotation by Bruno Bettelheim, who you know was a survivor of the Holocaust and very well-known psychoanalyst. And he said, I'm blocking. What cannot be put to words can also not be put to rest.
Yeah.
And if it is not, the wounds continue to fester from generation to generation. So Alex, I want you to talk with your grandchildren if you don't mind. But that's part of why there's the belief that we should talk, we should share, we should learn from history, right? So we don't repeat it. But this is very important. What cannot be put into words can also not be put to rest. Now, I know that this is a Western idea, right? The focus on words. That other cultures may not think about words as the most important vehicle. So I'm very open to all cultural differences. So it could be what cannot be put into dance or what cannot be put into song but the idea is the same. We don't heal, it continues. Solomon, you've been aching to speak. I can see it. Go ahead.
No, again, I'm listening and learning, and I was really thinking on how, because if someone out of the world would come and listen all to the webinar, it would seem that everything that we have done in this world has been terrible, no? And I truly believe that that is not right. I mean, we have done as humanity very good things. I mean, after the Holocaust, or because of the Holocaust, we have a Declaration of Human Rights, which is actually a good map on how we should move forward, no? Or over the last 200 and a little bit more years, we more than double of our life expectancy. And if we talk about the pandemic, well, it's the first time in our history that in 1 year we have a new virus and we have a vaccine. I mean, as Tony Youth used to say, that he was a pessimist, and because he was a pessimist, he was able to be and reflect on the small gains that we can incrementally have. So when I was listening to you, I was thinking we have to make an effort to be in both parts, appreciating what we have constructed and defending what we have constructed, and build over and better on the good things that we have done, but at the same time, do not forget on the wrong things, the terrible things that we have done and what we are continue doing in order to learn and to change. I was thinking in this duality on how if not, it's depressing. I mean, because I mean, yes, there's a trauma, and that is the main reason on what you study, the necessity of having a great documentary as the one that Aaron and Esther give us. But how do we do the equilibrium between the traumas, and how do we use all the good that we have put into this world in order to have a better equilibrium for the next generation? I mean, because the next generation is going, the heritage of the next generation, of course, are going to be a couple of traumas, but also a better world that can be possible. Those were my thoughts. I don't know.
We have quite a few comments and questions from the audience, which we will attend to in a minute. I just want to enter one more important issue. In the library of the center, we have a special section on victims' rights, rights of future generation, and reparative justice. Yes, future generations have rights, and that is a very important fight. So I'm inviting you all into that. It is a very important fight for us, and it is one of the human rights. So thank you, Solomon, for bringing back the wonderful framework. This is a great discussion. Let me quickly put together the question. Okay, in the Q&A, David and Edna Magda suggests, would you like to respectfully, they suggest respectfully to substitute the term death camps for the Nazi extermination camps. Absolutely, thank you, Edna. Edna was in the same school year as myself. To that, Edna. Flor Feldman is very kind, thinking that I understand Spanish from reading. I believe you're asking whether you lost the documentary. No, you can still watch it if you're when you have registered for us for this webinar. You have the free viewing of the documentary until Tuesday evening. So I believe I answered your question. And Susan Pisquiel Blackburn says, when Solomon referred to femicide, is he referring to domestic violence and or stranger violence? Solomon,
It's not only domestic violence, it's killing a woman because of being a woman, and it could come from someone that you know, but it could be someone that you don't know.
Susan also says, thank you to the Cohens. What struck me in the watching of the film was the compassionate approach all of the speakers emphasized. This is unique in 2G interviews as compared to the United States 2G's testimonies, which often speak of the resilience and success stories. I agree, Susan. Please get into a dialogue with us in the center. Write me an email. The compassionate integrity and dignity spoken of throughout the documentary is it distinctively descriptive of the Mexican Jewish point of view. She's asking. The Mexican Spanish language itself is such a beautiful reflection of this culture of caring. You will answer. Stephanie is asking, I want to know what Solomon Hotovsky thinks. I don't know what you mean, Stephanie. Thinks about what? So you'll have to ask. And let me just run through also the question and answers in the chat. So we have, so Bessie, no, you're not late to watch the film, as I said. Jacques Barth from Holland, we in the Netherlands are researching the physical impact of the second generation. How do you think this is different or similar? Jacques, we would love to hear more about your study, and that's a whole seminar. We'll talk about that. If the speakers want to, they can answer. Harold, a board member, listening to what Solomon has said about the political aspects of intergenerational trauma brings to mind the way that Putin has been able to rally many Russians around his war in Ukraine by claiming that, quotes, the Nazis are once again at the door of Russia. That is denazification of Ukraine, you remember that. Does the panel think that the conspiracy of silence in sharing the horrors faced by the past generation might make it easier for malignant leaders to manipulate the few details that do get shared from history to pervert history, so it may be used to manipulate people and maintain power? Thanks, Harold, and for the beautiful eloquence of the question. There's our advisory council member from South Africa, Irene Ochem, is speaking to you again, Solomon. She says, I can relate with the sad and ugly violence against women, the killing of women just because they're women. I'm in South Africa, where femicide is also quite prevalent. How can we put an end to this? Yeah, again, to my mind, what I said about COVID is similar to this, of course, and we continue. Irene is chair or co-chair of our women's issues, and maybe Solomon will also get involved. Let's think about that. Amelia says that trauma could be shared and released through multiple means of expression, movement, art, etc. Absolutely. And Jacques Barth is saying that it's a powerful movie. Who wants to answer first?
Yeah, I want to make a reflection about the silence and the transmission of things with no words. So when we were preparing the documentary, we were thinking how we can, because there is 90 interviews. So it's a lot of time people that is talking about. So we were thinking how we can put some breath things that the people can stop and feel what they have listened. So we were thinking first in some animation, and then we decided to put some dance on the film, so that the dance is a compliment and it speak about what they were saying, and these dance are feelings without words. And many people say that. They said the dance is just beautiful because you transmit the feelings that words cannot explain. So that's why we decide to put these dance movements on the film.
Remind me of Elie Wiesel, who to his last breath believed that we don't have words to express the Holocaust and what they experienced. And you know, Elie was the most articulate of all. So if he feels that. Alex, do you want to respond to any of the comments or questions, please?
Just said about Elie Wiesel is very, very touching, because that's the feeling I always had with my dad, that he didn't transmit it through words, but I really had the feelings, what he was feeling. I could feel it.
That's why I wanted to hug him. So it was feeling in the full organism, and you were responding with your own organism or body. Yeah, there are whole schools of therapy that be, you know, that, and there's a classic book, The Body Remembers, that focuses on physical, on the physical aspect, indeed. Thank you for mentioning that. Salomon, please.
Two brief thoughts. First, hello to the people that have written, even in the Stephanie and Kurian Fazlich, a fantastic friend, a fantastic also psychologist. So it's great to see that, and it was great to listen to her as on many other friends, no, the Big Sisters, Arnoldo Kraus. It was fantastic to listen on the documentary to many good friends that I didn't even know that they were children of Holocaust survivors. So two thoughts. Well, with Irene and what South Africa is living, there are a lot of things that we have to talk about feminicides. It's multifactorial, and the policy in order to prevent, to stop, and then to bring to justice has many aspects. No, it has to do with education. It has to do with safety and resources for safety for all women. It has to do with the judiciary system and not re-victimizing women that speak out of what it's happening, and if they are scared. It has to do with a lot of things, and Irene, it's something that in Mexico, in some governments, in some NGOs, it has been worked deeply. So I will be more than happy to be in touch for that. The other, and I don't know exactly how to put it into the discussion, but I truly believe it has to be there. And with the conspiracy of silence, today we have also a huge conspiracy of noise and of fake news and on misleading use of social media for putting your ideas or your lies into the ears of others. So in the question on how Putin has put and rally many Russians, not only many Russians, many people all over the world to commit with the Russian cause, but not because other people are not speaking, because many people are receiving fake news. So I do believe that in the era of social media, we have a dual challenge. Not only speaking the truth, speaking our feelings, defending our ideas, but also combating fake news and having the possibility of effectively counter-argumenting against fake news and misleading information, because that is, I mean, it is the same people that are pro-Putin today that are anti-vax, that thinks President López Obrador is doing a great job. I mean, those algorithms that we have in social media are becoming probably the most serious problems in terms of communicating between each other. So, I mean, I don't have any answers to that. I only have a real troubling problem that we are confronting today.
Mm-hmm. There's more for you, Salomon. Antonio, just a second. Antonio Zavala is saying, is giving you a proposal. In the coming years, Mexico will experience a strong reaction from the generations that have suffered from isolation, not only due to the pandemic, but also due to the violence of every day. We must start working on a policy proposal to repair these damages. From your position, Salomon, as a congressman, as a party leader, or as a Mexican, how do you think we should work? Let's start to do something now for Mexicans. There are more questions, and Antonio also says we need to study and analyze in order to understand the real problems. Right, so would you please share your thoughts in response, Salomon?
I would say Antonio is completely right. And I mean, over the last decades, we have also tried to have these truth commissions and learning what happened, and those exercises hadn't been very successful in Mexico. So we have to keep on trying, no? For example, Antonio, I don't have any doubt that in Mexico, we need an independent commission to study what our country did over the pandemic. I mean, again, more than 700,000 people died. That is not normal. And we cannot pass the page as if that had not happened. It was not an accident. We need to know the truth in order to move forward. So Antonio, I completely agree with you that not only memory projects, but to know the truth. And if they are responsibles, we need to make people and institutions that were responsible of criminal acts. We need to take them into justice. So I truly believe we have to advance on that, Antonio, and I thank you.
And thank you, Antonio. I would like to acknowledge that Antonio Zavala is a member of our advisory council. And thank you so much, Antonio. I would like also to add that you don't know, but you can find on, to you too, Solomon, you can find on our website the link to our panel, we held an international summit 2 years ago, November 20, whatever, the years of COVID sort of float to me, on International Summit on Domestic and Family Violence during COVID. And there were presentations from all over the world. And another very close Mexican colleague who is also in the film, Raquel Storza, was extremely helpful and active in that summit. So I urge all of you to look into that. Okay, Talia Shafir writes that the film gave voice to universal experience of children of survivors. I am psychophysical movement therapist dealing with many children of survivors and survivors who were children at that time. The major theme is always mystery and misunderstanding because of silence. The post-traumatic generation has their own trauma, ironically caused by the verbal silence of their parents and the unconscious transmission of the horrors of their experiences. I work with movement and language. We need both. Thank you, Talia. Please stay in touch with us. And Antonio, again, yeah, I thank you for your question. So, wow, your film has done a great deal to stimulate a lot of very important, which doesn't surprise me. That's why we need it. And out of respect for you, all of you, and full gratitude to our wonderfully engaged and engaging audience. Have you thought about the last word? Now take a deep breath. Take it back, because I always, after the webinar, can think about all the things I didn't say. So think about all the things you would like to say that you would kick yourself in an hour saying, oh, I should have said that. And of course, like all our webinars, they continue. As I mentioned earlier, our upcoming next one will be on Wednesday, February 22 at 1 Eastern Time. And it would be about multi-generational legacies of the Ukraine. And I promise you it's going to be the first in a series. I promise you it's going to hopefully help in some little ways. So, last words, who wants to go first?
Okay, just to that we are now working in the continue of this project. Now we are doing this web page with almost 120 right now, we are continuing interviewing second generation. And maybe we are going to start to interview third generation also to put it in the page. So I think it's very important, this page, to understand what's happening for people who are interested in search about the second and third generation. And we are looking also that somebody can give us grants to put it with English subtitles, because it's going to make it more universal. Right now, it's only in Spanish. All the interviews are in Spanish. The page is going to be ready maybe in 1 or 2 months. And I think it's a very good place to search and to research about second generation.
What Aaron didn't say is they're looking for funds for the translation. And it would be extremely helpful if any one of you can come up with ideas.
Okay.
Yes, and the center is very committed to house it if that happens. So it's important to us as well. Alex, dear. What? Yes, please share with us your last word, even though I'm sure we talk a lot more in the future. Go ahead for this.
Well, the only thing I can say is that the Holocaust or the Shoah is in my mind for, I think, the rest of my life. And the only thing I can say is never again. I don't have any other words. The only thing I can say is really.
And speaking is one way to lead to that. Salomon, my dear, last word.
Last words. My deeply thanks to Aaron and to Esther, because by doing the documentary, they have inspired us to think about many questions, many possibilities, and to this conversation. To you, Yael, thank you very much for so many years of working and help us learn a little bit more on the possibilities of repairing our planet. We only have one, so we have to work on it. Nobody is going to do what we do not do. So let's put our thinkings, our discussions, our learnings into work, because the magic of public policy, it's implementing at the end the idea. Today we had so many ideas. Let's find a way, each of us, through our own participation in the planet, how can we do a little bit more of what we are doing to repair the world? So thank you very much. Have a beautiful Sunday, and great to have this opportunity.
And might I out of just inspiration, when the last word, I spoke about the rights of future generations, and you mentioned the planet, Salomon. You also mentioned the progress that humanity has done. But some of the progress had been at the cost of the planet, which harms the rights of future generations. So my last word is, let's publicly commit to healing the planet, since, as you said, it's the only place we have. We don't have planet 2. As part of our big mission to repair all the other wounds of the world that we have to. So this is, thank you so much. We will continue, of course.
Okay. No, thank you, Yael.
Thank you,
Thank you
Yael.
very much. Thank you, Salomon. Thank you, Alejandra.
Thank you, Salomon.
Yes.
Mhm. I think
Wonderful.
it
Thank
was
you.
a great panel.
Yes. Mwah.